In 1998, 15 teenage choir girls from a small Georgia church vanished on their way to a regional singing competition. Their bus was found abandoned 2 days later, doors unlocked, choir books neatly stacked, and not a single trace of where the girls or their pastor had gone. The case fractured the town, drained families of hope, and eventually faded into a painful, unspoken history. 23 years later, a retired detective on vacation in Phoenix notices a group of women performing at a high-end venue, moving with uncanny choir-like precision. One face triggers a memory he thought he'd buried. Quiet DNA testing confirms the impossible. 11 of the missing girls are alive, living under new identities shaped by years of psychological control, under a man they all name with the same calm, haunted certainty, Pastor Clarke. What follows is a slow, meticulous investigation that peels back decades of manipulation, financial secrecy, and a pattern built on spiritual authority twisted for control. As survivors rebuild their lives and agents chase Clarke's shifting trail through deserts, bus stations, and abandoned storage units, one truth becomes clear. The Harmony Creek disappearance wasn't an accident. It wasn't a moment of chaos. It was a design, crafted, rehearsed, and still unfinished. And the man who started it all might be searching for his next voices. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. March 3rd, 1998. The kind of morning that feels weirdly perfect. Clear air, soft breeze, sunlight slipping across the gravel lot behind Harmony Creek Chapel. A place where people still wave at each other without thinking, where gossip travels faster than the church bells, and where faith is stitched into every conversation whether you want it or not. The girls arrived early, 15 teenagers in matching navy robes, laughing like they were stepping into a summer camp instead of a state competition. Someone's hair kept blowing into her lip gloss, another kept retying her sneakers, and 2 of them kept humming the warm-up song under their breath. You could feel that mixture of nerves and excitement, the kind that makes your chest tighten in a good way. Parents clustered nearby with thermoses and tired smiles. A few of them looked relieved to get a quiet weekend. Others lingered, pretending to double-check things just so they could hold their daughters a little longer. The blue and white church shuttle idled near the back steps. Freshly washed, front bumper slightly crooked. That crooked bumper had been a running joke for months, and standing in front of it was Pastor Evan Clarke, blue tie, stiff posture, that calm smile he always wore like it never left his face. Folks used to say, "Pastor Clarke don't even sweat. Man's colder than a glass of sweet tea in December." Not mean, just unreadable. When he called out, "All right, angels, load up," parents chuckled, and the girls rushed aboard, robes fluttering behind them. Everything about it looked normal. But if you were close enough, right up on the curb, you'd notice tiny things that didn't sit right. Clarke barely touched anyone's shoulder, barely made eye contact. He kept glancing at his watch, tapping the side of the shuttle like he was checking a heartbeat only he could hear. And there was quiet side talk, too. 2 mothers leaning close, whispering like kids in the back of class. He didn't even smile at Marcy. "Girl, he's been off all week. My sister said he forgot a whole prayer segment last Sunday." Then one of them shrugged it off. "Probably tired. He does too much." You know how people say things they don't believe, just to feel better? Yeah. One of those moments. The shuttle pulled out around 7:10 a.m. You could hear the girls singing already, their harmonies spilling out of the half-open windows, floating into the morning like something holy. Parents waved until the shuttle turned past the oak trees and disappeared. Nobody panicked. Nobody clutched their chest. Nobody felt the world shift. Not yet. Inside the chapel lobby, someone had left a tray of muffins. People picked at them, laughing about how the girls were probably already arguing over who got first solo. And when someone joked, knowing those kids they'll probably win by accident, the room cracked up. Everything felt fine. Hours passed. Traffic rolled. Life kept moving in that slow, small-town rhythm. Around noon, a few parents exchanged calls, checking if anyone had heard from their kids. Not worried, just curious. A dad laughed into the phone. They probably forgot they have parents, and no one thought otherwise. But by late afternoon, that comfortable peace started shifting. Just slightly. The event coordinator claimed the choir never checked in. One of the younger brothers said his sister's phone went straight to voicemail. A mother tried calling Clarke twice. He didn't pick up. Still, everyone tried to stay calm. People always miss exits on the back roads. And if anyone would get lost, it'd be Walter, the volunteer driver, who still used a paper map like it was 1972. But by early evening, tension crept into conversations. You could hear it in the grocery aisle, in the gas station parking lot, in every phone call. Someone whispered, why hasn't Pastor Clarke called? Someone else muttered, man drives everywhere. How'd he beat the shuttle there? By 9 p.m., families stood outside the chapel again, shivering in their jackets as the temperature dropped. No sirens yet. No news crews. Just parents pacing, tapping their phones, rubbing their hands together because they suddenly felt colder than the weather. The first jolt of fear didn't come from a scream or a discovery. It came from silence. The girls didn't call. The shuttle didn't arrive. And Clarke, who promised he'd see them there, was nowhere to be found. Living rooms across Harmony Creek filled with flickering TV lights and unanswered prayers. People sat on couches, elbows on knees, staring at the front doors like they expected their daughters to walk in at any moment. Nobody knew it yet, but that empty space where fear settled, that slow, sinking feeling, was the beginning of a story the town wouldn't escape for decades. A story that would get darker, stranger, and heavier the deeper anyone dug. And all anyone could do that night was wait. For 23 years, Harmony Creek lived inside the same quiet ache. People aged. Houses changed owners. The choir room turned into a storage space. And the chapel, once packed shoulder to shoulder, sat half-empty most Sundays, its pews holding more memories than people. Most families moved away eventually. Not out of anger, just exhaustion. There's only so long you can live beside the front door, hoping it opens. And yet, strangely, the town never talked about the girls the way you'd expect. It wasn't denial. It was something softer, something tired. Whenever someone mentioned the case, folks would just nod slowly, glance down, and change the subject because the words hurt too much. Even Pastor Clarke's name barely came up. People didn't call him guilty or innocent. They just said things like, he left, didn't he? That's all I need to know. Life drifted on like that until 2021. Not with a breaking headline, not with a call from the FBI, but with one man squinting up at a flashing LED billboard on a warm night in Phoenix, Arizona. Retired Detective Miles Wren wasn't even supposed to be there. He was tagging along with old coworkers, half listening to their jokes, half rubbing his knee like every retired cop eventually does. While the others argued about where to eat, he drifted back a few steps, letting the crowd swallow their voices. That's when he noticed the billboard above a nightlife venue. Bright gold letters, rotating graphic, loud music thumping through the sidewalk cracks. The Harmony set, live tonight. He almost ignored it until the screen flashed to a group pose. 15 women, perfectly aligned, chin to shoulder, shoulder to chin. And the formation bothered him. He leaned forward slightly, hand on his hip, like he was trying to anchor a memory. Wait a sec, he muttered, narrowing his eyes. Behind him, 2 strangers were whispering about the show. One laughed. Man, those girls look like a choir. The other replied, yeah, the routines are like 2 in sync. Gives me church flashbacks. That word, choir, hit Miles like static. He didn't panic, didn't gasp, just stepped closer, letting the lights flicker across his face as he watched the billboard loop again. And there she was, one woman turning toward the camera mid-pose. Her expression sharp, almost rehearsed. Her eyes older. Her face thinner. But the cheek mole? The tiny one near her right eye? He remembered it from a decades-old missing poster he used to keep pinned on his desk. He whispered, no way. No way that's her. He didn't trust his own certainty, not after so many years. But something in his chest pulled tight, slow, steady, deliberate. He stepped inside the venue, just to confirm. Not to confront. Not to accuse. Just to see. Inside, it wasn't chaotic like people imagine. Dim lights. Quiet chatter. The smell of perfume and citrus. Performers moved with a strange, controlled grace. More like dancers at a corporate showcase than anything scandalous. Miles watched from the back. Arms folded. Breathing slow. It wasn't what they were doing. It was how they moved. Every turn was precise. Every gesture mirrored, choreography built on discipline, not expression. And when one woman brushed her hair behind her ear, a small, nervous tick he remembered from old footage of rehearsals decades ago, he exhaled sharply, gripping the railing beside him. It wasn't certainty. Not yet. Just a deep, heavy recognition settling into place. He stepped outside, shaking his head, muttering, "If I'm wrong, I'll laugh about this for the rest of my life." But he didn't sound convinced. He called an old contact at the Phoenix PD, voice low. "Hey, it's Ren. Listen, just humor me. I need a quiet check on a venue. No alarms, no accusations. Just collect whatever glasses you can." The detective on the other end sighed, the kind of sigh a cop gives when he knows he should say no. But he trusted Ren. Over the next 2 days, officers walked in pretending to be customers, leaving with drink rims sealed in tiny evidence bags. Miles waited alone in his apartment, sitting on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the wall like it might blink back. 3 days later, he got the call. No dramatic music. No celebration. Just a soft, stunned voice. "Miles, we got matches." 11. 11 of them. He closed his eyes, breathing out through his nose, not in shock, but in the slow, heavy realization that something everyone thought was dead wasn't. The Harmony Creek case was alive again, and whatever happened next was going to unravel everything the town once believed. When the 11 matches came back, the world didn't erupt the way TV makes it look. There were no confetti cannons, just a slow, spreading current of disbelief, and, for some, relief so big it felt fragile. Federal agents stepped in quietly at first. "Close the loop," they said. "Keep it small until we know what we know." So they moved like swimmers beneath glassy water, efficient, deliberate, unseen, until they had to be seen. The rescued women were brought to a safe house with thick curtains and a kitchen that smelled like warmed bread. They arrived under blankets, shoulders hunched against the chill of fluorescent lights. For some, the trip back to any kind of safety was clumsy. Hands fumbling with a coffee cup, eyes darting at the lock on the door, lips tracing the names that once belonged to them and now didn't. The simplest gestures, tying a shoe, pushing a chair back, felt enormous. Investigators listened, a lot of listening, slow, patient, like learning an instrument for the first time. The women didn't rush through their stories. They came in fragments, a hymn here, a lost train ticket there, the sound of a man's shoe on a wooden floor at midnight. Memories were like glass, sharp and prone to cutting, so agents learned how to handle them gently. And the name kept coming up. Clarke, they would say in the flat, careful tones survivors use when they must speak of someone who once ruled their world. The financial trail that followed Clarke's name read like a map of careful cruelty. Shell nonprofits, empty office boxes, wire transfers labeled as mission expenses, checks written to companies that existed only on paper. Every transaction had a custom-made righteousness attached to it, phrases like youth renewal and spiritual outreach, phrases that sounded holy until you read the ledger. By the time the FBI's financial crimes team had traced several $100,000 through 3 states, the mood changed. It was no longer a mystery of loss. It was a design. Someone had planned this with the patience of a scheduler, the coldness of a ledger. Agents knocked on a storage unit in Nevada that turned out to be a quiet, ordinary rectangle of air and metal. The door rattled as they pushed it open. Inside were neat cardboard boxes, all labeled with Sundays and rehearsal times. Tucked between hymnals and practice audio was a worn notebook, its pages full of sermon notes, lists, and, most chillingly, names under a heading that read Next Voices. There was no dramatic evidence like shackles or hidden rooms. Clarke hadn't left the obvious. He'd left paper and pattern. And patterns are often harder to hide from a patient investigator than a single crime scene. Community reaction was messy and human. Some people went straight to anger. Neighbors who had once placed flowers at the church steps now spat out the pastor's name across diners. Others were quiet, ash-faced, refusing to say the word pastor aloud. Small-town chatter, once about ball games and pies, became about loyalty, about how trust had been folded into a ledger and mailed away. And in the shadows, Clarke moved like a rumor. Surveillance footage from a border town showed a man matching his gait, buying a bus ticket with cash. A motel clerk remembered a man with an odd limp and a Bible. A volunteer in a soup kitchen recalled a preacher with a soft voice who stayed after services, handing out business cards. Each sighting was a breadcrumb. None led to a trap. Clarke, if he was him, was careful. He had an old man's habit of changing small details, a new crew cut, a different tie, a different accent when he wanted one. The manhunt intensified. Reward posters went up. Task forces coordinated. But there's a different kind of hunt that happens quietly. Families who had learned to live inside absence started looking again with the stubbornness of someone who knows how to wait. Mothers sat at kitchen tables with stacks of printed faces, tracing the lines of their daughters' cheekbones like they might redraw the past. Meanwhile, the survivors began something else, less dramatic, more life-saving. Therapy at first, long, measured sessions with therapists who specialized in coercive control. Then practical steps, identity rebuilding, classes to handle email and banking, guidance on what to say when reporters show up. They formed a group, slowly, with a name that was careful not to attract attention at first. Voices Reclaimed, they called themselves when they finally felt able to talk about it out loud. Their public reemergence was understated. A small press conference, chairs set up in a semicircle, microphones that were mostly symbolic. When Grace, now using a name she'd chosen herself, stood to speak, the hush felt like a held breath. "We were taught to sing for someone else," she said, hands gripping a paper cup. "We're learning to make noise for ourselves now." That sentence landed in the room and settled. It had the weight of every story they'd told, and the hope of every one they were going to tell. Legal cases followed. A few men tied to the finances were arrested, accountants, travel coordinators, a lawyer who'd signed papers without asking questions. There were guilty pleas and quiet sentences that made the headlines for a day. But the head of the spider, Clarke, remained a shadow on the run. The government kept searching, issuing alerts, piecing together sightings. The trail kept thinning like smoke. Yet what worried people most wasn't simply that Clarke had escaped. It was that the pattern he used, church, charity, compassion, as camouflage, could be copied. The town started checking visitor logs. Parents took photos of every volunteer. Churches signed forms. It was a slow unspooling of trust, and for some, it felt like a wound reopening. As months turned, the survivors built something practical, an organization offering legal help, counseling, and a hotline for families who smelled the same rotten sweetness of fake charity. They wanted to make sure nobody could walk away with another choir ever again. But late one night, long after the cameras left and the press clacked into history, a surveillance camera outside a rural gas station caught a man in a baseball cap buying a can of coffee. He had a different nose, a fresh hairline, but his walk, just the tilt of his shoulder, matched old footage the investigators had. For the techs who looped and froze the frame, it was the sort of tiny detail that makes you look twice. The case didn't close with a courtroom slam or a final name in the paper. It closed, for now, with survivors learning to breathe into their newly chosen names, with families relearning how to laugh, and with agents who kept maps and ledgers and quiet alarms on a shelf labeled open. And outside, somewhere between towns and deserts, a man who called himself preacher, maybe reverend, maybe father, maybe something else entirely, still moved like a rumor. If you listen closely, you can hear the leftover notes of a hymn. Soft, distant, and stubborn. Will they find him before he finds new voices? That question hangs, long and patient, like the final chord of a song that hasn't quite finished playing. If this story pulled you in, don't slip away just yet. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive mystery we uncover. And tell me in the comments, should I continue this series and chase more cases that went silent for too long? Your engagement keeps these stories alive and helps bring light to the ones still searching for answers.